Good morning to you all. My name is Tony Huey, and as Chair of the Board of Debating SA, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2017 Debating SA Grand Final for Year 10. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, their beliefs and relationship with this land. Today is the conclusion to another very busy and enjoyable season of competition. This year we've had a record 246 teams representing 56 separate schools across the government, Catholic and independent sectors. I thank and I commend all debaters who have taken part and contributed this year. I hope that you have learned about and improved your skills in the art and the craft of debating. I hope you've also enjoyed working closely with your colleagues and coaches and had a lot of fun along the way. We are always looking for debaters who are keen to move to the next step and become an adjudicator. Debating SA provides all the training, so if you are in Year 10 or above and know someone in similar circumstances and are interested in being an adjudicator, please contact us. Debating SA is totally committed to promoting and supporting debating as a highly valuable and worthwhile life skill for our young people. We are very honoured to have the ongoing support and patronage of the Governor of South Australia, His Excellency Hugh Van Lay. Sincere thanks to James Tran, Sonia Lowen and David Morton for their unstinting commitment and hard work throughout the year in organising and running our program, as well as providing training and resources for schools. We thank formally the army of parents, teachers, coaches, adjudicators, families and supporters and helpers who have provided invaluable support in so many ways for all our debaters. We thank our host schools for so generously making available your facilities and staff so that we can hold our debates. We're very grateful today to the Honourable David Spears, Member for Bright, along with his parliamentary colleagues for kindly and generously facilitating the use of this wonderful house. We also thank the Parliamentary House staff for their assistance. What better place to be on this day to hear our top debaters than in this, our very own House of Assembly chamber in the Parliament of South Australia, a very powerful symbol of our democracy, of free speech and rigorous debate. I wish all the very best to our two grand final teams today, and I'm sure that we're in for a very enjoyable and engaging exchange. So, Madam Chair, without further ado, let the debate begin.
Year 10 Division Debating SA Grand Final Debate. My name is Tori Shakes and I am the chairman of this debate. The timekeeper is Ella Reddington. The topic of this debate is that the clergy should report child sexual abuse revealed during a confession. The affirmative team seated to my right is from Pembroke School, consisting of first speaker Emma Tam, second speaker Ellie Teo, and third speaker Annika Turin-Simmons. The negative team seated to my left is from Aberfoyle Park High School, consisting of first speaker Sam Purdon, second speaker Molly Eve Day, and third speaker Kevlin Pup. The grand final will be adjudicated by a panel of 5 adjudicators who are Miss Crick, Miss Burrows, Mr Wilkins, Miss Southman, and Mr Mitchison. The speaking time of this debate is 6 minutes. A single warning bell will sound at 5 minutes, and a double bell will sound at 6 minutes. If required, a continuous bell will sound for 30 seconds after the second bell, indicating that the speaker must conclude their speech. I ask that all mobile phones and other electronic devices will be switched off for the duration of the debate. I declare this debate open and call upon Emma Tam to open the affirmative space.
Good afternoon, ladies ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairman. The topic for this midday debate is that the clergy should report child sexual abuse revealed during a confession. We define the clergy as those ordained for religious duties in the Christian Church. We define should report as being enabled and directed to be morally obliged to make known to relevant authorities. We would like to define child sexual abuse as any suspected details of both contact or non-contact methods used to exploit a child in a sexual manner, as detailed by the World Health Organization. We would like to define revealed during a confession as made known to the clergy during a formal admission of one's sins with the desire of absolution, especially as a religious duty, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary. Therefore, we define this topic as that it is the moral obligation to enable clergy to report suspected child abuse revealed with the intent of gaining absolution. As the affirmative team, Pembroke strongly agrees with this topic. As first speaker today, I will be speaking on the moral grounding of this debate and thusly how we must determine the role that society's ethical values applies to this debate. Our second speaker, Ellie, will discuss the historical and psychological aspects of the topic through the progression of society as she examines the seal of sacrament. Our third speaker, Annika, will rebut the opposition's arguments before summing up our team's case. My first point today concerns the moral obligation denoted by the use of should. When examining the use of should in legal terms, it is very obvious that the term permits judgment. A quick example would be a comparison between the statements goods should be inspected and goods must be inspected. The latter phrase is adamant in demanding adherence. However, as the plain writing Federal Act indicates, the use of should in the former statement indicates a built-in flexibility. As in the context of today's debate, it is clear that the clergy should report is simply a recommendation. It's a subjective goal and not a mandatory requirement. Therefore, we would like to emphasise our opinion that the clergy should report child sexual abuse revealed during a confession, as it is ethically correct to not only enable them to facilitate the implementation of children's rights, as I shall continue to elaborate on, but it is likewise right to allow them their own judgment to act how they believe best serves the child, an allowance associated with the use of should. I will continue to speak on why this option is important, and Ellie will elaborate on how this option can be implemented and why it is a positive alternative to the current situation. This brings me to my second point, that with this topic being a subjective goal, subjectivity being a difference in judgment, one must discern how society judges what is ethically correct. We call these guidelines our rights, and they instruct us on what we believe to be right and what we believe to be wrong. This, in turn, influences the construction of laws to enforce and protect our rights. In 1990, the United Nations placed into effect the Convention on the Rights of the Child, a human rights treaty which sets out the multifaceted rights of anyone under the age of 18. Aside from Somalia, all other nations in the world have signed this treaty, thereby bound to it by international law, to act in the best interests of the child. These rights specifically regard children, and this treaty likewise declares the welfare of children the responsibility of the society, as detailed on the Government Human Rights website. Returning to the Convention, Article 34 explicitly states, governments should protect children from sexual abuse. So further down, Article 39 states, children who have been sexually abused should receive special help to restore their self-respect. So the government is accountable by thorough review of their commitment to these rights to protect children from sexual abuse and to provide them with the necessary help which is not achieved by allowing perpetrators to remain unidentified without the consequences accepted by society through adherence to this law. Yet, while legislation stands to exempt priests from being required to notify child abuse or neglect, children are not protected from sexual abuse to the best of the government's capabilities. Part 4 of the Children's Protection Act of 1993 states that if a person to whom this section applies suspects on reasonable grounds that a child has been or is being abused, the person must notify the department of that suspicion as soon as practicable. This applies to doctors and teachers, amongst other professions, including ministers of religion. However, the section goes on to state, this section does not require a minister of religion to divulge information communicated in the course of a confession. As long as this exemption stands, it allows religion to be placed above the rights detailed in international treaties. This in itself could be considered a violation of Article 14, which declares children have the right to believe whatever they want and to practice their religion, as long as they are not stopping others from enjoying these rights. Naturally, this sentiment is echoed by the broader Human Rights Declaration, emphasising the fact that religion opposing human rights opposes the very convention the government is committed to protecting. As by the ethical standards accepted by observance of the UN Declaration, it is only right for us to enable those to whom confessions are addressed to report any details of child sexual abuse, confirmed or suspected, as to best protect the rights of a child and, by extension, the very documents and values on which our society is built, as our rights state that the practice of religion should not stop others from enjoying their rights, in this case, the right to protection from sexual abuse. It is important to view a debate concerning the rights of a child, the implication of should, the law, and of course religion, from an ethical standpoint. Conclusively, the clergy should, by the moral obligations by which society is run, be enabled to act to protect the rights of the child whenever they suspect child sexual abuse. Moreover, the role of the clergy is to live as the Bible instructed. Therefore, it is reasonable to refer to the Bible in order to guide our judgment where the role of the clergy is concerned. And thus to conclude, I draw your attention to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 16. Live as people who are free in Christ, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, the evil in this case being the negative consequences of child abuse. Thank you.
I call upon Sam Hayden to open the negative case.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate today is that the clergy should report child sexual abuse revealed during a confession. We, the negative team, strongly disagree with this notion. We would like to say that we agree with the opposing team's definition. As first speaker today, I will detail to you the spiritual and ethical challenges behind this proposal. Our second speaker will describe the practical hurdles that will inevitably be encountered when attempting to enforce this ruling, and our second speaker will rebut and summarise our team case. Before I go on to my first point, allow me to correct the numerous misconceptions in the opposing team's case. The opposition has said that surely priests would have a moral duty to report on the child sexual abuse. Well, yes, they do. However, in the confessional, it is different. This requires breaking the seal of the confessional. As the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference President says, Dennis Hart, he says that confession is a fundamental part of the religion, of the freedom of religion that must continue to be recognised by Australian law. Outside of the confession, all offences against children must be reported to the authorities, and we are absolutely committed to doing so, the Archbishop said in this statement. In the confessional, we must uphold the law, but outside we will definitely report. We are absolutely not condoning child sexual abuse, and Melbourne Catholic Archbishop Dennis Hart says he'd go to jail in order to uphold the sanctity of the confessional. The opposing team has also said that they must notify the authorities as soon as practical. But as our second speaker will explain, this will never be practical. There are, however, much better ways of the Church to protect children, as our second speaker will also elaborate upon. Firstly, canon law, the system of laws and legal principles governing the faith and practice of the Catholic Church, precisely details the role of the confessional within such setting. Chapter 2, Canon 984 states, a confessor is prohibited completely from using knowledge acquired from confession to the detriment of the penitent, even when any danger of revelation is excluded. This scripture paints a very clear picture as to the importance and sanctity of the confessional as a part of the Catholic faith. A sacred act where one may ask God directly for forgiveness, without a judgment and to no direct harm of the confessee. A similar touchstone used in the Catholic Church is that of the seal of the confessional, a duty in which ordained priests are required to never disclose the information they have heard in the confessional, even under the threat of death. If one is to disclose this information, it will be followed with a striking excommunication, the lifting of which can only be performed by the Pope himself. Needless to say, the Catholic Church takes the sanctity of the confessional very seriously, making it completely unrealistic to ask priests to report on information gained during confession. Secondly, one cannot ask the clergy to report on what they hear in confession, as, in their faith, whatever punishment the priest receives would be minuscule when compared to the suffering they will endure for eternity if the seal is broken. It is not just a question of morality or ethics. It is also one of religious freedoms and faith. Section 116 of the Australian Constitution precludes the Federal Parliament from making laws for establishing any religion, imposing any religious observance, and or prohibiting the free exercise of any religion. Who are we to demand that these priests impede their right to observe their religion in some ill-conceived plot to end child sexual abuse, when it will in fact do little to nothing to solve the problem? Finally, throughout history, there has always been a separation between the church and the state, and for good reason. This is because individual and social well-being and functionality is dependent on both of these structures. The church is responsible for the spiritual empowerment and well-being of the faithful, and the state is responsible for the physical well-being, safety, law and order, and legal redress for all citizens. When one of these vital structures is forced to act in the role of the other, one or both of these structures will inevitably fall. When reporting any sin in confession, individuals are there to seek spiritual guidance based on a foundation of trust. The separation of church and state is a two-way street, and we must observe this important distinction. If perpetrators even suspected that this confidentiality would be displaced, their faith would be completely undermined. If the church is going to pick up the work of the state, is the state going to make up for the new lack of trust and faith in our society by providing services that the church no longer can? Confession must be a place where sinners can seek help to change, not to fear prosecution. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the clergy should not report on child sexual abuse reported during confession. For all the reasons presented before you today, there can be no justifiable reason behind disclosing this information. It impedes upon the fundamental tenets of the Catholic faith and the religious freedoms of the clergy within it, as well as eroding the notion of the separation of church and state. Exposing the confessional is not the cure, it is simply masking the symptoms. Thank you.
To continue the affirmative case, please welcome Eleanor Teeter.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of today's debate is that the clergy should report a child sexual abuse revealed during a confession. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe this statement to be true. However, first, I would like to point out some flaws in the opposition's points.
The first speaker has said that this sacrament is a sacred part of religion and a tradition we cannot change. However, I would like to begin by pointing out that the heavy seal over sacrament, while currently being strictly held, has not always been this way. I will be getting into this in more depth in my point. However, in short, the seal on penance has only been around since 1215 and was an entirely man-made concept created to fit a 13th century society. The problem is, we cannot fix the problems of this century with solutions of the 13th. If we want to address our societal problems of today, we need to adapt and change rather than sticking with a man-made rule aimed to help a 13th century society. And so to benefit our society, we should allow clergy to report child sexual abuse. The first speaker has also said that any clergy who breaks the seal of confession will automatically be excommunicated, ruining their lives. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the very problem we are discussing. This act of reporting and aiding justice should not be punished with shame and a near irrevocable excommunication, but rather it should be accepted, expected, and encouraged. The solution to our current societal problems will not be found if we continue this punishment, and so clergy should report child sexual abuse revealed during confession as to stop the prolonged problems. Our first speaker, Emma, has already spoken on the should of this debate, looking at the legal connotations surrounding the notion, and as well as this, she looked at the ethical guidelines we as humans follow, again in the sense of the law. Today, I will be looking at the psychology of sexual abusers and the effect forgiveness has on them, as well as the need for progression in our always changing societies. My first point is that the psychological problems surrounding child sex abuse perpetrators are not solved through forgiveness in confession. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, pedophilia is a psychiatric disorder affecting adults or older adolescents and is characterised by a primary or exclusive sexual attraction to children. And while it must be said that not all people with this disorder act on the impulses, we are looking at the people who do, and in the context of this topic, then go to confession looking for forgiveness. According to the National Centre for Biotechnology, there are significant abnormalities in the brains of pedophiles caused by early neurodevelopmental perturbations. With these developmental issues comes complications leading to compulsive and addictive behaviours ingrained into the pedophiles. According to a study by Yulia Grebchenko, it was found that because of these ingrained abnormalities of the brain, pedophilia is a lifelong disorder, which will always be a part of that person's life. These people suffering from pedophilia should be reported to the appropriate authorities, because the truth is, forgiveness is just not enough to prevent a lifelong psychiatric disorder from harming others, as long as we continue to allow people with pedophilia to walk away from confession, children will remain vulnerable to acts of child sexual abuse, regardless of forgiveness given and confessions made. And so, clergy should be reporting child sexual abuse revealed during confession, as the act of forgiveness is simply not enough. My next point is that our society needs to readdress and reevaluate the ways in which confession is handled, as it has done so in the past, to fit our ever-changing, ever-progressing societies. Yes, the seal placed over confession is currently being strictly held. However, it is an entirely man-made concept created to fit the 13th century. In the past, society has changed to such an extent that the rules and the handlings of confession have gone from being public to private. And there is again proof in the recent years that our society has progressed in such a way that the handlings of confession are again not acceptable. To fully understand how a change could occur, we need to look at the history of penance. Catholic historian Cyril Vogel was one of the rare historians who studied all forms of early medieval penance and is agreed upon by the wider community to be most accurate in the topic. In his studies, he found the Carolingian period to be held accountable for the fundamental development of penance. It was distinguished that public penance for public sins and private penance for private sins was a vital part of this system. A private sin is seen as a sin of the heart, only known to God and the sinner, and a public sin is seen as a sin being acted on impulses of the heart, known to more than just God and the sinner. Before the year 1215, public sins such as child sexual abuse were carried out in a public manner, as it was believed that satisfaction of the public community was required for absolution and reconciliation. This was changed in 1215 with a change in society's views on confession and how it should be handled. Vogel described this shift in society as an overriding concern with keeping good reputations and pastoral care rather than public punishment, and so penance became secured under the seal of penance. This is where we can see the modern concept that no matter the sin, clergy could not reveal what was heard in confession. And so child sexual abuse, for example, could not be reported. But if the views of society could cause a change to the rules of confession in the 1200s, then surely we should do the same for our changing societal views of today. According to the Australian Institute of Family Studies, our society has changed drastically over the past 50 years in relation to family structures and how we view the importance of protecting our children, adding to the complexities of providing child protection. With such drastic changes in views, we have an obligation to move along with them and create a change more beneficial to the welfare of children and less forgiving of the abusers. We cannot solve today's problems with 13th century thinking. We should be progressing as a society to make this important, necessary change, allowing clergy to report child sexual abuse. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, this is an extremely controversial topic in which it should be agreed upon that the reformation of certain aspects to religion does not take away from the core of said religion, especially in the case that we are looking at today. The current focus on the sacrament has been on private individual confession and is inadequate in dealing with grave public sins such as child sexual abuse. And so, clergy should report sexual abuse revealed during confession, allowing for a safer, healthier community where the very core of our values are protected. Thank you.
To continue the negative team case, please welcome Molly Eve Doyle.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate today is that the clergy should report child sexual abuse revealed to them in confession. We, the negative team, strongly disagree with this statement. Our first speaker has already explained the challenges relating to the spiritual and ethical considerations of this topic. Today, the second speaker, I will be discussing how practical implementing something like this will be, and how there are much more constructive ways for the church to deal with the problem. I would first like to start by pointing out some flaws in the opposition's team case. The opposition tried to tell you that the seal of confession should be changed, as it is too old, not relevant anymore, and that society is changing. Yes, society may be changing, but religion will always be important. According to an article by BBC News, there are estimated to be 1.2 billion Catholics in the world today. And a recent article by Rome Reports has stated that the Vatican's most recent statistics have shown an increase of around 18 million Catholics in recent figures. And out of these, there are around 6 million people in Australia alone. More and more people around the world are relying on this religion and its values. If we are to remove the sanctity of the confessional and the right to seek absolution, just imagine how many people's faith we will be destroying. They also said that pedophilia is forever and will never go away. However, as I will explain in my second point, research has shown that we can reduce the chances of reoffence with rehabilitation programs. That is a much more practical responsibility for the church to take on. Firstly, attempting to enforce this as law would prove to be completely impractical and would undoubtedly impede upon the privacy of those in the confessional. As our first speaker has already mentioned, confessionals are based on canon laws and a foundation of trust and faith. If perpetrators believed this was no longer the case, they would simply stop going to confession. This means that we would be no further ahead in solving or stopping their crime, as the information would not be revealed in the first place. Another significant barrier is that, because confessionals are completely anonymous, the clergy would not be aware who the penitent is. Although the priest may suggest that a person reveal their identity to them, he cannot insist and must ask permission from the penitent if the priest wishes to discuss that sin outside of the confessional. This means that even if the clergy does want to report the crime, they will have difficulty in reporting the person. I would also like to ask, how do you propose we enforce this ruling? We have thought of two ways, both options far from practical. The first way would be to simply trust the word of the clergy. This is obviously problematic. As discussed by our first speaker, canon law clearly states that a clergy must not report on any sin heard within the confessional under any circumstance. So when asked if they heard anything, the answer would most likely be a deafening silence. Option 2 is to install recording equipment within a confessional, rendering the whole process void. If people realise that they are going to a confessional and will have the entire conversation recorded for an unknown entity to analyse and review, no one will use the confessional anymore, even if they are simply confessing envy or impure thoughts. Ultimately, we would be no further ahead in solving or stopping this crime. A system that has for thousands of years provided forgiveness and absolution should not be thrown away in a completely impractical attempt to report a handful of criminals. Secondly, there are much more constructive ways to go about alleviating this problem. The Church could rather be required to act on any knowledge revealed in confession by setting up restitution or rehabilitation services for both perpetrators and victims. This could be made a responsibility based on the basic tenet of faith that I am my brother's keeper, while the justice side is left purely to the state, as this part is their responsibility. Research conducted by the Canadian government showed that sex offenders that received treatment and rehabilitation within their communities were much less likely to reoffend. Offenders who did not receive any treatment after prosecution were likely to reoffend at a rate of 17%. Nearly double that of those who did. Another much more practical solution would be for the Church to run protective behaviour, education and empowerment programmes for priests, children and their parents. This way, priests receive the training and education they require. Children who may be sexually abused know they have the support and courage they need to talk to their parents, and their parents have the appropriate information to report straight to authorities should it occur. Not only does this mean that offenders are being reported and caught by the right people, but it is also taking out the middleman and preventing clergy from being put in a compromising position. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, it is clear that enforcing this law would be, as our first speaker put it, invasive and immoral, and ultimately completely impractical. Church and state should stay separate, and in doing so, the Church is able to provide spiritual empowerment and support in ways that they could not if the state were to invade the Church and force upon them this unfair proposal. Thank you.
To conclude the affirmative case, I call upon Annika Trinson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of this debate is that clergy should report child sex abuse revealed in confession. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe this statement to be true. I would like to begin my debate by rebutting the other team's cases. The first negative speaker said that the church and state should remain separated. We would like to disagree. To work towards the safety of children, church and state must learn to work together, put aside their differences and come to a compromise. In this case, this compromise would be to lift the seal of confession only under specific circumstances, such as the endangerment of a child. To allow clergy to report child sex abuse revealed in confession will not only bring the church and state closer together in a positive way, working towards a common goal, but will also unite them in the fight for child safety and further protect those at risk, a priority both the church and state have in common, but have yet to work together towards. The first speaker said that we could lose trust in the church. However, I would like to suggest that we will actually gain a trust in the church with the knowledge that they will be reporting what is necessary, rather than concealing what is heard. In this way, the church will be working towards the same goal as society by protecting children's rights, and so clergy should report child sexual abuse with the trust built through the revealing of those who affect our society in a negative way. The first speaker has also said that clergy will break the law before breaking the seal. If a clergy feels that the importance of the seal of confession, something that was only introduced to ensure an individual's good reputation in the 13th century, as our second speaker mentioned, is more crucial than the safety and well-being of our younger generation, of which, according to the Children Research Centre, 1 in 10 children are abused before their 18th birthday, then we would like to argue that this clergy in no way upholds the values of the church, to be good, to be kind, and to care for the well-being of his congregation, not using their religion as a cover-up for evil. The negative team has stated that laws against religion cannot be made. However, we are not asking for new laws to be made. We are simply looking for a compromise between church and state in which the seal of confessional will be lifted in special circumstances in order to protect the rights of our children. The second speaker has asked the question, how will we enforce this? We would like to argue that there is no need to do so, as we have defined the topic as should, meaning the moral obligation to. We believe this is not a matter of enforcement, but a matter of removing the seal of confession in special circumstances so that, if a priest feels he has the moral obligation to do so, he is able to report a child abuse revealed during a confession without having to worry about being excommunicated by the church. We believe that instead of creating laws to enforce this matter, we should be removing the exemption that prevents priests from helping those in need and allow them to report people when they feel that they are morally obligated to do so. The second speaker spoke about how if people know that they are reported, they will no longer go to confession. We would like to argue that this is the desired outcome, as it will inform criminals that child abuse is not something that they can get away with, and let them know that the consequences of child abuse extend beyond the effects of the perpetrator. As such, providing clergy with the moral obligation to report child sexual abuse will deliver the message that perpetrators cannot escape the consequences of their crime by confession, as the consequences extend far beyond themselves. The second speaker has talked about the abuse of privacy and how it will be invasive to report these crimes. While we are arguing that the seal of confessionals should be lifted, this does not mean that the clergy will in any way be able to abuse their knowledge of this information. We would like to reiterate that the seal should only be lifted in the case of crimes such as child sexual abuse, in order to provide clergy with the opportunity to report child sexual abuse revealed in confession, instead of being bound to secrecy with the fear of excommunication. Furthermore, much like therapists and doctors, there is an understood legal and client confidentiality that cannot be breached unless it is in the case of a serious crime or potential harm of another. Therefore, clergy should be able to report child sexual abuse revealed during confession, as the seal of confession should be lifted only for certain circumstances, and confessors' privacy will in no way be breached. I would like to summarise my team's case now. Our first speaker, Emma, talked about how the moral obligation denoted by the use of the word should, and how in the context of this debate that clergy should report is simply a subjective goal that we should work towards. She also spoke about how best to protect the rights of a child, clergy should report child abuse revealed in confession. Our second speaker, Ellie, spoke about the psychology of perpetrators and how these people need to be reported to relevant authorities. She went on to argue about how the seal of confession is a man-made concept that was made to protect people's good reputations in the 13th century and not to expose their public sins. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we, the affirmative team, strongly believe that clergy should be enabled to report child sexual abuse revealed during a confession, as the consequences of their crimes extend far beyond the perpetrator. Thank you.
To conclude the negative case and this afternoon's debate, I call upon Carolyn Perret.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for a debate today is that the clergy should report child sexual abuse revealed during a confession. We, the negative team, wholeheartedly disagree with this statement. I will now go on to point out the many flaws in the opposition's team case. First of all, I would like to state that, ladies and gentlemen, we entirely agree with the assertion proposed by the opposition that child sexual abuse is bad, and in no way are we condoning sexual abuse. However, this is not the topic we are here to discuss today. As a negative team, we would like the affirmative team to not deviate. The opposition has also said the seal of confession should only be lifted for certain circumstances. I would like to ask, each situation is different, and how will this lift be decided, and by whom? The opposition has also said that surely priests would have a moral duty, if not a legal one, to report any concerns. Yes, they do. However, in the confession, this requires breaking the seal of confession. Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference President, Melbourne Archbishop Dennis Hart says confession is a fundamental part of freedom of religion that must continue to be recognised by Australian law. Outside of the confession, all offences against children must be reported to the authorities, and we are absolutely committed to doing so, as he said. In the confessional, we must uphold the law, and outside we will definitely report it. We are absolutely not condoning sexual abuse, and Melbourne's Archbishop said he'd go to jail in order to uphold the sanctity of the confessional. In addition, the rights of the clergy are completely ignored and must be taken into consideration. As a recent article by SBS states, clergies are caught between canon law and civil law, and Rome has put a lot of pressure on clergies to make sure canon law and the rights of priests are being observed. The CEO of Catholic Church, Truth, Justice and Healing Council, Francis Sullivan, expects a number of clergy will be very conflicted if it becomes law. He said if Parliaments bring in the new law, then priests like everyone else will be expected to obey the law or suffer the consequences. It is absolutely unsympathetic to completely disregard the rights and beliefs of the clergy and their religion. The opposition has also said the seal of confession should be changed, as it is too old. Yes, and society is changing. Yes, society is changing, but religion remains. According to an article by BBC News, there are estimated to be 1.2 billion Catholics in the world today. And a recent article by Rome Report states that the Vatican's most recent statistics have shown an increase of around 18 million Catholics in recent figures. And out of these, there are 6 million Catholics in Australia alone. More and more people around the world are relying on this religion and its values. If we are to remove the sanctity of the confessional and the right to seek absolution, just imagine how many people around the world we are disappointing. The opposition has also said that the clergy has to report what they hear to the authorities. We completely disagree, as it is not just a question of morality or ethicality. Section 116 of the Constitution of Australia precludes the Commonwealth of Australia from making laws establishing any religion, imposing any religious observance, or prohibiting the exercise of religion. The opposition has also said that perpetrators who confess to sexually abusing will only re-offend. Ladies and gentlemen, the seal of confession is based upon the sacrament of penance. This is about the healing and forgiveness journey of the individual. The priest will urge the offender to seek help. In addition, as our second speaker mentioned, research conducted by the Canadian government shows the treatment of sex offenders is in fact quite effective. Offenders who receive treatment were likely to re-offend with a rate of 17%, nearly double of those who received treatment. Ladies and gentlemen, this is quite a large difference that needs to be recognised. Also, in addition to this, in the penitent's eyes, they are reporting themselves to the highest power available. The clergy is a stand-in, and according to the Catholic faith, the person is talking to God. The clergy is the middleman and has no right to tell anyone else. In this context, the priest is simply the conduit. To force the priest to act on this knowledge is to betray the seal of the confessional. They are seeking help, forgiveness, and to make restitution, all within their religion. The opposition has also said that the church and state should be together. The church and state were separated for a very sound reason. Before the separation, the church ruled with an iron fist, a group that used the fear of God to dictate people's lives. The separation is for the better. The opposition has also said that once a priest finds out who the offender is, they should report it and it will bring the child justice. Under the law of the church, if a clergy breaks the seal, he is automatically punished with excommunication. That is the ultimate sanction for the clergy. In addition, child sexual abuse cases are often word against word cases with no eyewitnesses or medical or scientific evidence. Complaints often take years or decades to disclose. In the Roman Catholic Church, the seal of confession is the absolute duty of the clergy not to disclose anything they learn from penitents during the course of the sacrament of penance, even where the seal of confession does not strictly apply. Clergies have a serious obligation not to cause scandal by the way they speak. So, in summary, the philosophical challenges behind this proposal and the practical hurdles one may encounter when attempting to reinforce this ruling are far too great. We agree the blight of sexual abuse must be dealt with, but destroying the sanctity of the confessional is not constructive or practical. Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, at first glance it may seem like a non-question, but the rights of individuals to practice their religion must not be obstructed. Exposing the confessional is not the cure, it is simply masking the symptoms. Thank you.
Thank you again to both teams. Whilst the adjudicators finalise their decision today, it's my role to spur our networking capabilities, and one of the biggest things that we've got is our Facebook page. So for the parents in the room that haven't liked it yet, please do so. Lots of information goes onto that media source, including training dates and various other hints that the debaters can use throughout the season. This year we've had a significant influx of aid for our debaters in grades 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and senior in providing handy hints and articles that may be of use to debaters throughout the season. One of the other things we're trying to do this year as well is develop our networking capabilities with the parents. For all you guys in the room here, you may not be aware that we actually do conduct numerous training sessions throughout the year. Particularly before the debating season actually starts, we run workshops that are typically held out at Nazareth. We do debating workshops in rebuttal, public speaking, and various other elements that are really beneficial to debaters, as you can see today. So if you'd like to leave your details with us, we are collecting your email addresses today, which we will use next year purely as an information source for the parents. simply to send out the information regarding those training sessions and dates that we have throughout the year. So Miss Lauren and myself will chase you up today. Thank you.
I call upon a representative of the adjudication panel to come forward and award the debate.
Firstly, can I thank you all for coming along today in this auspicious venue, and can, on behalf of the adjudication panel, thank both teams and congratulate both teams on reaching it to today's grand final. It really is the pinnacle of what has been a fantastic season, as our chairman, Tony Huey, has pointed out. So a special round of applause to both teams. Today's debate has been adjudicated by a panel of 5 adjudicators, so as a result of that we are not giving individual feedback to either team, as was the case for the semi-finals. And today's decision was a split decision of 3 to 2, and I'm pleased to announce that the winner of the grand final for 2017 is the negative team from our year. I should point out, of course, that clapping is apparently unparliamentary, but I won't tell you what for that. Congratulations to Aberfoyle Park High School, and thank you, and good afternoon.
I call upon a member of the runner-up team to Pembroke School to give a vote of thanks.
I would like to thank everyone who came out to watch us today, everyone who organises the competition throughout these terms, not just today, and of course to our opposition for putting up a really great fight and giving us a great debate, to our coach Dr Hunt, Ms Waldorf Davis, and to our parents who support us every week. Thank you.
I call upon a member from the winning team from Aberfoyle Park High School to second that vote of thanks. Today it's been a really good fight. I thank my team for obviously being great members and over there too. I thank our coaches for coaching us, obviously our parents, obviously the adjudicators and debating us safe. Thank you, it's been amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. I now declare this debate closed.